Welcome back to Talore. I realised it's been nearly a year since I made my first video on this fantasy world I've been developing, and a lot has been edited and changed since then, so here's an updated introduction to Talore, which will include everything you'll need to get into this setting. The planet of Arnowin is the second planet from its sun within the habitable zone. It possesses a water and carbon cycle, complex tectonic activity, and an atmosphere of slightly more oxygen than Earth, with the rest being nitrogen and carbon dioxide, alongside trace elements such as water vapour and argon. Currently, there are 7 continents born from eons of fire and stone on Arnowin: Telor itself, Haldramar, Devarak Ul, Pandor, Resterica, Yaldera, and finally Ktoros. The continent of Talore is the focus of my worldbuilding, and it is the most detailed of the 7. It is currently on the collision course of Haldramar, which has uplifted the Arphanos Mountains from the limestone belt which cuts Talore in half, and a minor tectonic plate has rifted apart to begin the formation of Tealian Mountains, a soon-to-be significant riftland. Arnowin has no native life of its own. However, a folding space-time called Nemald Gwar, the Wound of the World, has been transporting plant and animal life from unknown worlds from beyond the stars. Amongst these interplanetary immigrants were early hominins, who have since evolved complex civilization, cultures and languages on Arnowin, and have diversified into many different species, both naturally evolved and unnaturally created. The origins of the Sophant beings have remained a mystery, and those who do know refuse to speak of what lies beyond the wound, which in itself is a scarcely known truth of reality. The religion of Alor states that all mortals, as sentient beings are called, originate from the blood of Yaldera, one of the first gods, or Nyar. Meanwhile, Elven spiritualism dictates that the second son, their only god, wept for the ruin of the world, and their tears became the Fae and Elves, quote, fairest of all beings, and that all other mortal species are those who deserted the original god. Despite these conflicting creation myths, all know that the giants are the eldest of the mortals. However, they have long since vanished from the world. During the era of giants, mortality, mainly man, dwarves and Urlish, were a warring mess. The Solduric Empire had ground many distinct cultures to dust, and had left blood and fire in its wake, whilst the nation of Tir al-Kir was forced to use foul magics to fight for their freedom. In mortality's greatest need, the stone giants, last of the giantess races, came down from the mountains nearly 2,000 years ago. They would teach mortality astronomy, geography, the secret of steel, and most importantly, the runic magic the giants had forged from starlight and sunfire. The Age of Runes, a subset of the era of giants, began, a time of arcane learning, trade and travel. Whilst war still happened, the giants kept a strict watch on the activities of many rulers, even the mighty beast houses of Soldor. However, a man of the Hishlands, a coastal region of Haldramar, rose to power. King Aramas the Betrayer saw the giants' runes as shackles meant to bind humanity, and so he and his scholars broke off and formed the School of Flames, distinct in its doctrine from the giants' School of Light. He rallied a great army behind him, and managed to carve out a large piece of the Solduric Empire for himself. There all hellfire broke loose, alliances shattered, friends turned into enemies, and Arcanum, the origin of all magic, flowed so greatly into the world that entire nations were ruined in days. The mountains were riven like sand, and the stars wept, and their tears burned the earth. This was the Iron Blood Wars, named so for the liquid metal blood of the giants who were massacred. It ended when Nemald Gwar, the Wound of the World, was used to destroy a great giantess city, creating the reality warping area around the Wound today. This was the Sundering, and it ended the era of giants and began the modern era of isolation. The survivors were scattered like dust on the wind, and were forced to rebuild from the ashes and scorched stones of the previous era. The stone giants who survived began to vanish for unknown reasons, and the final fading of the final giant would begin the modern age, the Age of Solitude, for now mortality has no guiding hand, no overseer, shackles, or defence against the perils of this continent. Despite this, hope remained. In 505 SR Stone Giant Reckoning, Imbrahil the Unyielding conquered all of the region called the Crown of Talore, Tavermere. He founded the kingdom of Iridea, and once more trade, knowledge, and people travelled freely. The success of Iridea would later be attributed to the dwarven kingdom of Teal, in the namesake Tealian mountains. The two lands had a strong bond, both peoples respecting the other. Tealian dwarves would fight for Iridea in the Borderlands, and Iridean soldiers would fight for Teal in the establishment of their northern colony, Sterach. Even now, this alliance endures, even if the old kingdoms have not. For 120 years ago, the dwarves of Teal dug too deep and awakened the draconic faber worms, terrible monsters which used flame, frost, and blight to put the dwarven kingdom to the sword. Many citadels were felled in a month, and Tealians were unprepared. When the faber worms came down to Iridea from the mountains, Iridea and its last king, Oedin the Ruinous, stood ready alongside his vanguards of the Iro Sunlords and Tainori landsmen. The War of the Worm-Waking raged for 2 years, and in the end Iridea and Teal had slain all but a handful of the faber worms, yet at a great cost. Iridea was broken, and every one of the Tarim royal family, descendants of Imbrahil himself, were slain. The kingdom shattered into the three baronies of Taramir, Tainor, Durunia, and Praf, who rule to this day, none taking the title of kingdom, as none have taken all of Taramir, as Imbrahil once did. The Borderlands and Skelemarch in particular would fracture into many small squabbling fiefdoms and duchies, with the threat of the Pollock forcemen keeping the Borderlands from turning in on itself. The Worm-Waking ended in ruin. However, once again the mortals of Talore maintain hope. The dwarves have clung to life, and the colony of Sterach, north of Teal, remains a powerful centre of the Tealian culture and power. Humanity still holds strong, especially in Tainor and Durunia, some of the wealthiest, most powerful countries in the continent, and after millennia of isolation, the Fae and Elves of the Elderlands have begun to venture outside, reconnecting with the outside world, and the means of the northern seas have endured no matter the odds, because, well, that's kind of their whole thing. This is a modern state of Talore, a continent wrought from the battles of old gods, the alliances of stalwart allies, and the designs of beings who existed before life required flesh, before magic was a rare and powerful thing. Let's cover some of the more important regions and peoples of Talore. Tainor is said to be the crown jewel of Taramir, which in itself is the crown of Talore. It is a major maritime nation. Its position and geography allow it access over the Relcar Channel. Any who want to trade between Taramir and the seas of Mia have to pay Tainori tariffs to travel through the channel. This had made the barony extremely wealthy and one of the most politically prominent nations in the continent. Tainori life is centered around the sea, and it is considered a rite of passage to go on one's first major sea voyage around Talore, being a sort of coming of age where a child becomes an adult. The Mediterranean climate of the region means that vast orchards of fruit and wineries dot the landscape, with the meltwater of the river Namril feeding fertile fields surrounded by ochre and amber grasslands of Tainor. House Greyguard presides over Tainor, as they were elected as barons by Imbrahil himself when he founded Iridea, and created the modern feudal system still followed. They collect taxes and soldiers from their nobles, often training their military to be adept on land and at sea. Despite all this power, Tainor is in a frail position, as the previous baron of Tainor, Taiseld, has died under mysterious circumstances. Many suspect, in whispered rumours of course, never to an actual nobleman, that Taiseld was murdered by his sister Urseld and her Borderlander mage consort Orphas, so that they could take the storm throne in the capital city of Sonorith, or Greybait of common folk. Durunia sees this as an opportunity to take the influential location of Tainor. Durunia was the heartland of old Iridea, and its people worshipped the old kingdom and Imbrahil like they were divinities. The people of Durunia still clutch family keepsakes and talismans which trace back to Iridea, as far back as its founding over 400 years ago. They have a strict social structure, as most cultures descendant of Soldor do, and patriarchal stock system of tracking kingship, meaning that blood relations tracked through the male line going back to a common ancestor, all descendants of this common ancestor being a Durunian's family. The Durunians and Irideans of old put great stock on one's relatives and blood. The current Baron of House Attribution, Adrian, is infamous across the entire continent. Adrian Bloodmaker, Earthshaker, loved and reviled in equal measure, has dragged Durunia back from the brink of collapse countless times. Most notable was when he ascended to the throne, as his father, Borm the Ale Baron, was more interested in wine than running his barony, and it declined greatly during his tenure of the throne. Adrian is the opposite of his father in nearly every single goddamn way. His work to restore Durunia is near inhuman, especially in his reforming of the Hounds, an elite garrison of cavalry which spearheaded Iridaean, and by extension, Durunian conquest, and bought the respect of his noblemen with coin, leadership, or if necessary, blood. Now he sees the weakness of Baron Urseld's hold over Tainor as an opportunity to further his ultimate goal: unite Taramir as one kingdom, reform Irdea as one nation, against the coming storm his seers and star readers predict. The westernmost barony of Irdea is easily the least unified. Praf has been in decline since the Wormwaking, as while its Baron family, the Fulwin, regained control over their centre of power, the county of Trenachor, the rest of their lands fell to chaos. The wilderness fought back, counties declared themselves independent countries, and soon House Fulwin was being attacked on all sides by hopefuls wanting to get a claim on the rulership of Praf. Alongside this political disunity, culturally speaking, the Prafins are descended from the Stone Helm of the Northwest, while the rest of Taramir are descended from the Eastern Empire of Soldor, which Iridea declared itself a successor of. The Prafins are culturally distinct from other Taramians, and so trade and outside relations are strained. The younger Baron Carousel Fulwin is skilled in statescraft despite her youth, and she still struggles to hold Terencore County together, let alone Praf in its entirety. Her highest advisor and blood brother of her father, a man named Meldrick, is using every ounce of his influence to protect the young Baron, as was the old Baron Wintrid's last wish. Beyond Taramir, the Borderlands were the farthest reaches of Iridaean power. Settlers came around 300 years ago, soon after the alliance with Teal began, building what they could in the rough terrain. Forests, wild beasts, and craggy mountain tops, separated by moors, defined this rough with its people compensating for by being the most goddamn stubborn, hard-working folk in Talore. Despite this, the Borderlanders are also fond of mead and feasts, throwing the greatest festivals and celebrations of the Iridaean descendants. However, the region was founded by pushing back the Stonehelm-descended Pollock folk. Many superstitions circle the Pollock and Druidic far to the north, of them being able to talk to trees, command beasts to do their bidding, and living in the treetops. Most of these rumours are just that, rumours of course, but the Druids of Pull are known to have some sort of strange power, subtle and unknown to other scholars of the arcane. The two peoples, Borderlanders and Pollock, have a fierce blood feud, the Pollock for having much of their ancestral land taken from them, and the Borderlanders for being refused aid and cooperation when their kinsmen fell ill and dying, when they were willing to negotiate with the Northerners. Even now, skirmishes along the border might turn into an all-out war as the warlord, Kylan of Helm, marches south, gathering a great army behind him to take back their homelands. Little is known of the region called Helm, the last bastion of the Stonehelm peoples, such as Pull and Druid, as they are an isolationist people due to their unique animistic beliefs. Beyond Helm and the Sea of Tyne is the nearly entirely unknown region called the Elderlands. In the Valyric era, when civilization first began, the Age of Shadowfall put an end to elven dominance in Talore, as the era was named after the elves Valir. The Feyfolk retreated to their heartland, the Elderlands, where the second son was said to have ferried them to Talore from another world. They have remained isolated in those wild groves and tree-grown paths, where the highest snowbark are revered, not cut down, and where the roots of trees are widened and hollowed to form subterranean chambers in which the elves are said to live. Elves are not the only Fae here, though. The insectoid, warlike Winderlings have fought with the dwarven kingdom of Sterach for decades now, and the tree men Hruskir still make the migrations from the Arphanos mountains to the sea every year to ferry the souls of their dead to the second sun. The elves, after millennia, are starting to leave their forested groves and enter the outside world for the first time in even the eldest of famed memory, and for unknown reasons. Some say they are here to look for a lost relic of their people, Arcturian, the Sword of Stars, said to be hidden in the depths of Sterach. Sterach is the last remaining dwarven kingdom, the remnants of Teal clinging to life. However, Sterachite language and culture is quite different to the Tealians. While the Tealians are quite conservative and only dressed in greys and dull greens, the Sterachite are said to wear tapestries of colourful embroidery and tails woven into angular robes. Despite this disparity, the Sterachite dwarves are still just as secretive about their strict religion as the Tealians were, never sharing any details of their faith to outsiders. Even very close dwarven and non-dwarven friends will not talk about it. Sterach is a major confluence of trade and culture in Talore, with Taramiran, Ralkirian, and Fey traditions and goods all meeting here. Shadow lurks in Sterach's depths, however, as Uthrain, father worm of the eternal flame, is sealed away within its deepest corridors as a last-ditch effort to stop it from destroying the kingdom. Even now, tremors and earthquakes are still felt from the dragon's roars and hunts. Oh, that is pretty much all you need to know about Telor to get started. Thanks for all the support over the last year and a bit or so. It really does mean many, many worlds to me, and I'm just forever grateful for all the kind words in the comments. So, cheers.